yesterday that I found interesting. It's a word that I had heard before, but I never really understood what it meant. And the word I learned was dispensation and what it means in the biblical sense. So basically, God has different time periods where he communicates and interacts with his people in different ways, and each different way he's tried has been called a dispensation. So I'll give you an example. When Israel first went into the land of Israel, they had no leaders. They were just individual tribes. And about every 80 to 100 years, the Israeli people would basically get such horrible behavior where they wouldn't be praying to God. They'd be following idols and doing all these evil things in God's view. And what God would do is he would get so angry, he would bring in a people group from outside to take over Israel and turn them all into slaves, kill a bunch and turn them all into slaves. And then the Israeli people, when they were turned all into slaves, they would be like, oh, we're so sorry, God, please save us, please help us. And then God would send a judge or a hero to lead a rebellion and save all the people. And then they'd be good for another 80 years to 100 years. And then it would get so bad, because not that they got bad at the 80-year mark, they got bad continuously, but it'd get so bad between 80 and 100 years, about a long human lifespan, that he would have to subjugate them again with the outside group and then raise another hero, and then they'd be repentant and they'd behave well. And then each generation after that, each 20-year group would get worse and worse. And so the most famous judge was Samson, who led the people against the Philistines and would kill 2,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey and all this stuff. So nevertheless, that was the time of judges. Okay. Then the people went and they said, we want a king. And so God let them have kings then. When they had kings, that was the time of prophets, where basically God communicated with prophets to the kings and the people. So the prophets would come to the king and say, God says do this or don't do this, and the king would do it or not do it and stuff like that. And the kings would sometimes kill the prophets, or the people would kill the prophets. But anyway, so God would use prophets to try to get his people to behave, and that really didn't work out too well. So then, fast forward a little bit, he sends Jesus, the Messiah, and shows his people this is how you're supposed to act, and that starts Christianity. So when Christianity starts, the whole people of Israel get kicked out of their land and sent all over the world, and they're dispersed. And then Christians become the most powerful group in the world. We grow as a religion, we take over much of the world, control much of the world, and we're using the stuff that Jesus taught us to behave properly, and we expand over 2,000 years. In the dispensation of the church age, or the dispensation of grace, God stops communicating directly with people on a regular basis. He doesn't send prophets to talk to us all the time with direct messages, because we have the word of God from Jesus and we know how to behave. And so we argue amongst ourselves on certain details of that, but nevertheless, we have been stewarding the world for 2,000 years. Now we're at the point where the world has gotten to the point where we're having people fall away from the faith, and the world is getting really terrible. And this is what's leading up to the tribulation. So this part in the Bible that we read into called the rapture is when God comes and takes all the faithful members of the church and takes them off the earth to heaven. And the reason he does that is because the church is a very powerful force. The Antichrist is not going to be able to take over the world with the church here, who, when we witness him and read the signs, know that we have to stand against him. We would be a big problem. So let's just take America, for instance. We know that the Antichrist is probably going to come out of Europe and be the leader of the whole world. We as Americans aren't going to put up with that. Some guy in Europe telling us what to do? No way. We would either ignore him, or if he tried to force us to, we'd kick his butt. I mean, sorry for using the B word. But we would kick his behind. And that is because we as Christians with huge military force, when we're pushed, we fight back super hard and we conquer our enemies. Look at what we did after Pearl Harbor. Look at what we did after 9/11. Anytime we get sucker punched, we come back like, it says don't poke the bear. We maul whoever messes with us. So that's the problem the Antichrist has, is he is going to come from Europe and try to take over the whole world, but America is over here and we're like, no. We're the world policemen. We're not going to put up with your guff, sir. We're in charge. So we have to be taken off the board. So that can be done in many ways, but I believe that the rapture of the church will just, taking all the Christians out of America, which would be a huge number of people, would basically take a ton of our soldiers out, a ton of our police, would cause economic upheaval in the land, and basically we'd be in the Great Depression and people would be begging for sandwiches. And the Antichrist will come along and he'll say, I'm in charge of the world now, and I'll give you a sandwich, but you no longer have your Bill of Rights and your freedoms. And the people who are left will be like, okay, who cares about freedom? I'm starving to death. If I'm dead, who cares? So give me the sandwich, and I don't care about my freedoms. You're in charge, sir. So that's pretty much the way I see it going. I could be wrong. But another thing, actually, that I found very interesting yesterday that was kind of a head slapper was somebody came along and said, the reason that we are given leadership choices that are so terrible, whenever people come up and we're like, how's this guy running for president? He's an idiot. How's this other person running for president? They're an idiot. And then we find out after they've been president, we look into what they did. They were just following orders from rich and powerful people. We're like, oh, they're owned and paid for by the world elites, the globalists. Well, that's actually part of the plan. The globalists want to put yes men and people who just talk a good game but really aren't leaders in positions of power, because when the Antichrist comes on the scene, everyone in the world will be so impressed that an actual competent leader has appeared after not having one for so long that everyone will want to follow him. Basically, we're starved for leadership. And that's not a bug of the system, it's a feature. They want us starved for proper leadership so that when the Antichrist comes along, we'll fall in line right behind him. So that was another one that when I heard that, I went, oh, that totally makes sense. This is why we keep getting these politicians that are just, they're part of the system. They're not, nobody stands out. And so recently, because of the way the elections are designed in America, we got a guy who isn't part of the system, and we elected him. That's why I don't think he's going to be allowed to rule. I don't think that Trump is going to be allowed to get back into office. He might be. Everything's looking that way, but I just don't see the globalists this close to their 2030 plan letting him come in for 4 years from 25 to 29, or 24 to 28, but it's really takes thing in January 25 and goes to 29 in January. But I don't think they can let him. I don't think it's even a decision for them. They can't let him be back in charge because he will hinder their globalist agenda and plans. They have to do something. Their backs are against a wall. So we'll see in the next 2 months what happens. But again, yesterday I learned about the dispensations of the church ages, basically of God's behavior towards humans. And right now the church is in charge of the world right now. That's why we have to be removed so that all the craziness can happen, because we have too much power over evil, and to fight evil and to stand against it, we have to be taken out of the picture as the church. So, nevertheless, and then the other thing I learned was the reason we've been getting such horrible leader choices, such milquetoast leaders, is because they want us starved for leadership when the Antichrist does come on the world scene, so that everyone will be so amazed that they'll fall right in line behind them. So, hope you enjoyed this. May God bless you and keep you, and may light shine upon you.